Are the Crossroads book podcasts,
The
book
book club.
club. we have
We're the
we,
Crossroads book club.
that's a pretty good name.
Yeah.
Instead of doing an actual music album this week, we decided to do a book, and it's Bono's brand new memoir. Well, actually, it's not that new anymore, but
Mm.
Surrender, 40 songs, one story is the name of his memoir. So Bono, lead singer of U2, released his memoir in November 1st, 2022. It has 40 chapters that match the related U2 album Songs of Surrender, which was released March 17th, 2023. And we did talk about that album on this podcast earlier this year.
Mm.
So we have read, both of us, this whole book. Disclosure though, I did give up halfway reading this book and I switched to the audiobook halfway. I realized after reading half of it, I was like, I'm just not a book person. I just can't read stuff anymore.
Mm.
So I picked up the audiobook. It's narrated by Bono, which is nice, and we could go into a bit more detail in afterwards. But Eric, your initial thoughts on this memoir?
So I was excited to read this. For those of you that have heard the podcast of the Sons of Surrender album that we reviewed, I kind of gave it a mediocre review. Obviously, I was like, I'm a huge U2 fan, and it just didn't do it for me. But the more I listened to it, the more it grew on me. And I think even reading this book, it just really solidifies some of the songs. So like I kind of understand why he chose these songs, because like in the previous review I was like, they should have done this song, they should have done that song,
Right.
right? But these are 40 songs. Like the chapters are each 40 song on the album. However, they're not in the same order as the album. So the songs are like, the reason I understand now they picked these songs is because it best represents, like in Bono's view, their life and how they grew up as a band, which makes a lot of sense when you read this book. Um, I quite enjoyed this. I feel like I'm the opposite. I felt like reading books before, like I could not do it, and now I feel like maybe I'm becoming older, like an old man, and I'm just like, I want silence. I'm going to read my book. but but I quite enjoyed this. There were some songs on or some chapters that I really enjoyed, especially because I kind of got the feel of it. I don't know if you did. Of like kind of where the song kind of originated from and why it came to be. Like, so that's each chapter, but he writes it in a way where it's linear of the band. Like sometimes he'll go kind of back in time or forward in time, uh, but it kind of just shows like his generic idea of what the song was about. Um, it like I can understand why the people of Ireland hate you too. I can completely understand that, because I knew he had something to do with the whole IRA struggle, uh,
Mm.
and the British against the Irish Republic when they were fighting and everything. But I didn't know it was to the point where he was like ripping flags up in Dublin on stage,
Yep.
like the Irish flag. So I'm just like, that's a little bit crazy. I can see you doing it in a different country, but like, I knew Sunday Bloody Sunday was about that whole incident,
Mm-hmm.
and even their newest song on the Songs of Innocence album, "Raised by Wolves," which I actually thought was about like the war in Iraq, like all that stuff happening.
Right.
But it wasn't. And when you go back and listen to the song, like I found like reading this book, I was going back and listening to those original songs and being like, that makes sense. That completely makes sense. Um, I thought he's very like involved with world politics,
Oh my god.
which I feel like it's a bit too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like it's like, okay, like you should be take most people who you see these artists or movie stars that get involved in charities, they're all like, like, this is my charity, right? And then you know, like, oh, this person's the face of this charity. However, Bono is actually going to these countries and is just like, yeah, bring me to the war zone, right? And it's just like, this is nuts. This is a little bit like to the point where it's like, okay, maybe you need to step back a bit, Bono, right? Maybe you don't need to get involved with British politics, right? But he feels like he has to. And you know what? Like I do admire his drive for that. And a lot of the U2 songs originate from struggles like this. One part I found that there was some humor in it too. Like even when they were trying to get their agent, Paul McGuinness,
Mm.
and they were trying to hire him, and they were like literally go over to his house, and his wife's trying to convince him like just hire my husband. He's like really good at this, and they're like no, like, and then Bono ends up going on a trip to London. And I loved that part because he goes into all these record companies in London. He's there for a week, and he's like, yeah, I have a meeting with so and so, the head. They're like, oh yeah, sure, but he doesn't have a meeting with them. He just says he does. And then he's like, I'll come back in a couple hours when you've listened to the album. And they're like, what? And he's like, well, I'm only here for 7 days. And so I thought that drive was pretty cool of him just going. I feel like you can't get away with that now.
No, there's no way.
But yeah, like I enjoyed it. I thought it was very cool seeing like there were some songs where I actually thought I knew what the song was about. Like for instance, one of my favorite songs off this album was "Every Breaking Wave." I thought it was something to do with like a relationship, like to like a couple, but it's actually like when Paul leaves the band,
Mhm.
like he's been with them for this whole time and is like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. And it's just like it's kind of puts into perspective this, like it's not about love, it's more about like life opening and closing doors kind
Yep.
of thing,
Mhm.
which I thought was cool. I mean, like I don't even know where to start with this because there's
There's
just so much.
there's so many stories in here. And like I could see, like, I did enjoy this book. Bono's writing style is very much a lyrical style. Like a lot
Mhm.
of times as I was reading it, or I guess in my case listening to it, it felt like lyrics. He was writing lyrics. It's
Mhm.
very like, it's not like a traditional story where you just like, put the events in order and everything. Like the way he writes
Mhm.
is very lyrical, which was pretty interesting. Um, if you ever get a chance, if you want to like redo this as an audiobook, I would actually recommend the audiobook over the actual like text reading, because there's certain parts in this book where he like inserts lyrics for the songs. In the
Mhm.
audiobook he actually sings those parts, which like
Mhm.
puts a lot of like meaning into it. And it sort of reminds you like what this song sounds like, because he mentions the lyrics a decent amount of time, so like he actually like sings those
Mhm.
parts. Additionally, whenever there's sections where someone else is talking, so like George W. Bush or Steve Jobs or whatever, he does their accent. It's like pretty funny. It's
That's
actually pretty
amazing.
funny.
That is amazing.
um but yeah, there's a lot of world politics in this book. Like,
Mhm.
if you're going into this just like strictly, and I think that's maybe the nature of U2, or at least Bono as a frontman. Um, Half this book is world politics, and he's just explaining like what's going on during the writing of the song, and like what causes he's a part of, and which people he needs to talk to get grants or whatever it is. So if you're going into this strictly thinking like this is how U2 started and this is how
No.
U2 like got into a band practice space and like wrote these notes and everything, this is not that book. This is very much
Mhm.
like, his worldview and like his life and stuff. So
Yeah, and he's not afraid of like people like hating him
yeah.
for these thoughts, which is insane because like even like I thought it was really cool Bullet the Blue Sky, like when he goes to South America
Mm.
and he's like he's dealing with this like country at war with itself almost, and he's there and he's seeing like people dying, and all this. And like I think there was one part where they were just like walking around and the rebels decided to play a joke and they just started firing guns in the air. They're just like, holy shit. Right. But like that's where Bullet the Blue Sky comes in, and it's supposed to be like the Americans coming in their planes, which is cool. How like I really respect Edge as a guitar player, like trying to implement these sounds that they have. But you're totally right. Like this book is not the book where you're going in here is thinking, I want to know about you too. This is I want to know about Bono,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the book that I would recommend because I have read it,
Oh yeah.
it's U2. This one, it's so this has actually got into water. That's why it looks haggard. But what I like about it is that every section or every chapter of the book, it actually goes through. So each thing it'll have like Bono's response and then each band member's response
Oh, okay.
to
Cool.
like what was happening, and it kind of starts off from the how they started. So this is the YouTube band book that you need to pick up, which is U2 by U2.
Nice.
However, this is like getting into Bono's deep dive of his like thoughts and and everything
Yeah.
like that. So it's interesting because like I didn't know too much about his family, which is kind of neat because this is I feel like this is the first time he's actually ever talked about his family,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
he's a pretty private person. I didn't know how he has like a lot of kids,
Yeah.
which is insane. I
It's an
never thought that.
Irish family, so he has a lot of
Mhm,
kids. But yeah, it's wild. Like there's a reason why it's 40 chapters. He has so many stories that you
mhm,
wouldn't believe happened, but it's Bono, so you just believe because like he's Bono, right? Like
mhm.
talking to Nelson Mandela, or like working with Steve Jobs on the iPod,
That
and
was
like
interesting.
yeah, and then working with Dr. Dre on beats. Like
Mhm.
there's just so many stories he's had. It's like crazy to think like what a full life he's actually lived.
Well, yeah, like driving around with like Paul McCartney. Paul
Yeah,
McCartney's giving him a tour of like, oh yeah, I grew up down that street, and it's just like,
yeah,
this is like I always get a kick out of reading this stuff because it's like, man, like these people like they have these idols, and then they're actually like, meeting their idols
yeah,
like to a point in the book, which is cool.
yeah.
But
And like even when he talks about like working with Bill Clinton, working with George W. Bush, like
mhm,
Donald Trump, Obama, like it's just wild, like all the stories and
mhm.
the access that he has because he is Bono.
Yeah, and then it's insane because like I remember reading one of the chapters, and he's like in the Pentagon, and I'm like, how the hell did you get into the Pentagon?
He's
Well,
just
it's Bono.
yeah, he's just not a normal like rock musician,
No,
right?
he's not.
He's just like on a different level. It's wild.
Yeah, and he definitely like if there was any sort of like political band, like a real political band, I feel like these are the guys. These are them because I
Yeah,
don't think that there's a song that's like generic of like, oh, this is like me meeting a girl one day and I fell in love. Like it's literally like the song Sweetest Thing he wrote as an apology song to
yeah,
his wife
yeah,
he was neglecting for a long time. Right? So like most of these songs are because of like pride in the name of love. Martin Luther King, right?
yeah.
Like call a beautiful day I feel like is which I kind of liked his explanation of the bridge of a beautiful day. It's like Neil Armstrong in space looking at the earth,
Hmm.
and that like when you hear that bridge again you're just like, man, that really just like puts that cherry on the cake, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. His life is fascinating. Oh, one thing I do want to mention, like when you read this, just the brotherly love this band has in the band, and it sort of
Mhm,
gives context as how like these four individuals stayed together for so long in a band, which is like essentially unheard of, right? There's not many
mhm,
bands that have all original members from day one. But that brotherly love does show through in this book, and there's a lot of examples he goes through with that. Um,
mhm.
it's crazy.
Which is a great point because like even Adam Clayton getting addicted to drugs, right?
Yeah.
And then, or even like Edge losing his wife, like divorcing his wife, and just even like he goes through like the anger problems that they went through.
Mm.
Like all of them would be yelling at each other, and like the Edge was calm, but then when he would lose it, everyone's like, "Holy shit, he's never lost it before," right? Like it's insane. Like you said, like it's very rare that a band sticks together.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up. Final thoughts and ratings for Surrender, 40 songs, one story by Bono.
I mean, I liked it. I did think that the politics kind of got a little bit too much, but then I kind of had to sit back and think, yeah, you know what? This isn't an actual thing about you two. This is Bono's
Mm-hmm.
like one story, like 40 songs, one story, right? So it's by Bono. I'm gonna give this a 7.5
Oh,
out of 10.
nice.
And because like I've read other books, like I would give this one a high rating because I really enjoyed this.
Mm,
But I've also read other music biographies, and I love them like way better than this. Like I found there's a lot of like I had to really focus and put a lot of intelligence and reading to this, whereas some things you can sit back and kind of enjoy the story. Like for instance, the last one I read was the Dave Grohl Storyteller,
mm,
which I thought was just it was just like kind of hanging out with Dave Grohl, and Dave Grohl's telling you stories, which I got a kick out of. Whereas
nice.
you're right, this is more like metaphorically written like
Yeah,
lyrics,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm sort of with you on that. Like a 7 out of 10 for me. Like it's a fascinate. Like the reason why this book is fascinating is because Bono's life is fascinating.
It
But
is.
I don't think the book itself is a entertaining read in the way that it's written. But I think if it was written in a different style, I feel like it wouldn't be Bono because Bono's always like making up lyrics on stage and he's always like going on tangents and stuff. So it does
Mhm.
feel like he wrote this thing and like it's coming from his voice. So I don't know how he would do this any other way. But the real like entertainment value of this book comes from Bono being so interesting himself
Mhm.
and going through so many things. So
Mhm.
yeah, 7 out of 10 for me. But I would recommend the audiobook over the actual text.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. Yeah, because like him singing the lyrics and him doing like impressions of other people is actually pretty funny. It's actually pretty
Nice.
good. Yeah. Okay, that's it. That's Surrender or discussion on Surrender, 40 songs, our story. So this is our second last podcast for the year. Next week will be our last one for the year, and we are going to be doing a recap of 2023. So we're going to go through every single album that we reviewed and ranked, and we're going to revisit it and re-rank all of them. So stay tuned next week because that's going to be a hilarious. I some of the rankings that I saw, I was like, "There's no way we gave it this." Like, I was pretty like shocked that we gave it that score. But we will revisit those scores, re-rank them, and we'll see where we end up. So that'll be next week.
Yes.
So yeah, this is the Crossroads Music Podcast at twitch.tv/the Crossroads Music Podcast. We're gonna be live again next week on Monday at 10 p.m. ET, 7 p.m. PT. Catch us on Spotify, Apple Music, all those places. Come to Discord, YouTube, all those things. I think that's about it. Chasing Dragonflies. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next
Thank
time.
you.
Eric, any closing thoughts, random thoughts, anything to leave our viewers with some wisdom with?
I mean, in the words of Bono, you can go your own way.
Very, very good. Perfect. All right. We'll see you all next week. Bye bye.